Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the Director of Membership and Member Services. Okay, so many independent publishers feel like there's this great divide between them and the big five publishers. And one of the biggest issues is access to various sales markets, such as bookstores, retail stores, and more. But the good news is that there are actually many ways that major publishers and indie publishers can work together to the betterment of both. One such way is through distribution. It can be quite difficult for indie publishers to land traditional distribution, but some indie publishers have found a path through Simon & Schuster. So to discuss this and how it works on the podcast today, we have Simon & Schuster Vice President of Publisher Services, Keith Parent. Hello, Keith. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm doing well. Great to be with you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, one thing I wanted to make clear at the top is when we're talking about traditional distribution, we're not talking about wholesale distribution. So we're not talking about like if you are like an author publisher and you just put your book onto Ingram Spark or something. We're talking about where a sales team at the distribution, as the distributor, actually sells your books to bookstores and such. Is there anything you wanted to add about that concept? That's a kind of simplified version of it.
Oh, sure. At SNS, we think a partnership is really a dynamic agreement between ourselves and our distributed publishers. It's a lot more than sales representation. That said, I think our sales force is probably one of the best in the business. They continue to grow, evolve, and meet lots of different needs depending on the publisher. But in a formal sense, what our partnership means is we offer sort of a suite of different services: warehousing and fulfillment, customer service, financial reporting, as you mentioned, sales, but we also provide really fantastic reporting tools and demand planning support, access to POS, things like databases like BookScan to monitor the marketplace. And more importantly, in an informal sense, partnership means essentially working with our publishing partners through good times and bad. We're available for guidance, advice. We share best practices and really leverage each other's expertise to deliver the best results.
And you mentioned POS. So just for people listening, what is POS? Point of sale?
Exactly. It's point of sale data. It's a sale to a consumer that's recorded by a retailer and then reported back to services like Circana BookScan.
Yeah, and those are we IBPA members do get a discount on access to Circana BookScan and places like that. But to be clear, it is not inexpensive. It's a very robust system. And so, but if they get distribution through you all, then it sounds like then that's included, and they're not like paying some extra separate fee for that.
Yep, absolutely. It's included in our partnership.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of indie publishers out there that are like, yes, I want this. Let's do it. So let's try to help them figure out how process whole works. So is this something that they can sign up for? Like, do they go online and they fill out some application?
So it's not really like signing up for a service necessarily, or even a formal application. We go through, there are ways to sort of make your case or present your business to Simon & Schuster. I would encourage everyone to go to the Simon & Schuster distribution website. You can find it easily through Googling. And we have sort of a questionnaire available there where you can share a bit about your business, your vision, what makes you different in the marketplace. From there, we essentially field those submissions and look for opportunities or for publishers that fill maybe gaps in our catalog, publishers that present unique IP or who have something that we don't already necessarily have in our bag. We will reach out and essentially go through what I think is a pretty long process of getting to know each other. Not every one of those conversations sort of results in a long-term partnership, but they certainly do result in us learning from small and independent publishers out there in the industry, and also potentially developing a partnership that may go on for many, many years to come. I would equate it more to kind of like dating, getting to know each other, but getting to know what your values are, what your goals are, objectives from the partnership, what you would expect from a distributor. Not every distributor is the same culturally or even in terms of what services they offer. So it's really important before we get into any sort of long-term partnership with the publisher that we understand on both sides what each party can deliver, and then we see where it goes from there.
Well, as we all know, dating always works out, and it's really fun. So
exactly, it is a really fun process, honestly, Chris. I enjoy the process of getting to know all of these publishers, whether it ends up in a partnership or not. It's a small industry that we're in, and it's really fantastic to get a window into how folks are experimenting with publishing different formats, leveraging different tools for marketing to build a community. So it's really a fun experience getting to learn more about who's out there and who's interested in partnership.
Yeah, and also that this exists at all. I mean, again, there is, you're on the big five side, but I do think that indie publishers sometimes see that like there's this wall where they're like, oh, one day I want to be that successful. But I love that you all are actually finding ways to collaborate. And I do want to mention that we do have the website. And if you're watching the YouTube version, we'll put it on the screen, but it's simonschusterpublishing.com/SNS-distribution. So again, you can look that up elsewhere, but that's the link. So you mentioned about this hole in your catalog. How do publishers find out, like, well, what are the holes in Simon & Schuster's catalog? Do you have like a list on your site that's like, we're looking for books that are about mountains or something like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as being so simple as what are the holes. As you know, and as many of your members know, the industry is dynamic and constantly changing. Consumer interests are constantly evolving. And it's our jobs to sort of be ahead of that curve, to be looking into the future. So, we're often, I wouldn't say necessarily it's looking for holes as much as it's looking for opportunities that enhance the catalog, that may build it out, make it a bit more robust at a category level. For example, one category that we have grown in significantly over the last few years is graphic novels. And we see that as a category that continues to show opportunity. So that's a great example where Simon & Schuster isn't necessarily known for publishing graphic novels, but it is an area that's, we've become kind of known for as a distributor. We continue to learn to develop new retail relationships. As we grow, it's almost like a snowball in terms of how successful we can be in a category. So I wouldn't say that the door is closed to anyone in any category. We're kind of open to everything, given that the business, the marketplace continues to evolve.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when people are filling out the application, they're going to want to know, well, are there things like that they've sold a certain amount of books, or that they have certain connections with bookstores already, things like that can help prove that they would be a good fit for you all, so that, we can kind of help guide them when they fill out the application. That's what you all are looking for.
Sure. I would say in your initial outreach to Simon & Schuster, it's important to essentially tell us who you are, explain why you're unique or what you're bringing that's different, even within the category that you might publish into. We will get to conversations about maybe, historical sales and things like that as the conversation evolves, but not everyone has historical sales. So I wouldn't say that it's mission critical to include sales data or anything like that in your initial outreach. It's more about letting us know who you are, what types of books you publish, who your authors are, demonstrate that you may have developed if you have a platform or your authors already have a platform. Simon & Schuster is fantastic at getting books out into the marketplace. We look for partners who know the consumer, who know the readers that they're trying to reach or that they already have reached, and then we help put books in those hands.
Okay. And then also in terms of the application, let's say they fill it out today, right? What does that process look like in terms of when you, like, first of all, you all are very busy. I'm sure you get a lot of applications. Do you have time to notify everybody who applies, yes or no? Or maybe you just may not hear from you all and then you're just like, oh, I guess I didn't get it.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have a formal yes or no, thumbs up or thumbs down process. And that's mainly because to say no to someone in 2023, we may want to keep that conversation going, that door open for, a few years down the road when your business may be a bit more mature and ready to take a leap to distribution. So I wouldn't say that we ever really say no to anyone. In terms of a timeline, it really depends on the publisher and where they're coming from. So it can the process of getting to know each other, or dating, if you will, can take anywhere between a few months to several years of conversations. It often has to do with maybe how quickly you can move your inventory, or how quickly you can move on from a previous contractual relationship. So it's really publisher to publisher on the timeline. And I would say we are open to conversations with every publisher of every size. And we're not necessarily in the business of saying flat out no, never to anyone.
And so if someone fills out an application, they will hear from you in some regard. Or I'm just,
that's the goal. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah. I'm
just
just, because sometimes people, they are like, you know how it is with like a job, and you're like looking for jobs, and you're like, you put out 100 applications, and then you're like, you're like, did they even see it? Like, you just don't even hear anything. And so sometimes, okay, well, that's helpful. Because it's also helpful that you talk to people. If you're not ready now, you might talk to them about, well, what eventually down the road, what may make you interested. Because I know that's another thing that some people who apply for distribution have run into before, where they say, well, I don't even know what I didn't fulfill. So getting feedback is very helpful. So sometimes when people, are applying, we're kind of assuming that they don't have any distribution, but let's say they are already working with another distributor. Like, how does that work, where they, is that okay if they apply and they're like, hey, I already am working with so-and-so, are you open to then still looking at them, or what's that process like?
Oh, absolutely. Many of our publishers that we currently work with started at a different distributor. Publishers, as they grow and evolve, will kind of decide, maybe they've outgrown their current distributor, maybe culturally they're not aligned, maybe there are some challenges or issues. So we're absolutely open to discussing distribution with folks that are currently distributed. I also think it's a good idea to do your research. So if you check out that Simon & Schuster website that you shared earlier, Chris, we have highlighted many publishers that we currently work with. It's pretty easy to do a little bit of sleuthing to see, hey, they actually transitioned, from X, Y, and Z distributor over to Simon & Schuster 3 years ago or 2 years ago, after being with that distributor for several years. So sometimes folks will go through several relationships before they come to S&S. And, it's really interesting to see that evolution. S&S is, I think, different from our peers in the market, in that we're known for a really high level of service, strong retail and wholesale relationships, fantastic reporting, but most importantly, I think it's about accessibility and flexibility. So Simon culturally is a place where the doors are open. We don't necessarily force our publishers into any box or to adhere to any particular way of going about their business. Often publishers, we sign up with a publisher because we are inspired or fascinated by how they are successful at what they do. We don't want to crush that creativity. So when you come to Simon, again, we're super flexible, and we're all about giving you access to kind of every corner of our business so that you can see best practices that we might have in place. Things that are working that S&S does. We actually have titles that you can kind of comp to within your own catalog. So there's lots of advantages, I think, to our way of doing business.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask about, is that concept of, so you all are publishers and you have your own books that you publish. And then if you take someone on you're distributing their books as part of the contract, like you're not their public, you're not in, how do I put it? Like, you're not connected to them in terms of what they publish now, or do you talk to them about what they publish? Like, I'm interested what that relationship is, because I think that some people, like you said, they're creative, they're doing their own thing. But also then I'm interested, are there times when then you do acquire them and talk to them about, okay, well, we actually want to bring you under our umbrella? Like, how does that whole thing work?
Sure. So to start with sort of the first half of your question, we are a distributor. So we pick, pack, and ship books out to retailers, out to wholesalers around the world, and domestically, obviously, but also globally. And we are sales representation. So we're going in and meeting with buyers and positioning books so that they can potentially be selected to be on shelves. We are not getting involved in the editorial process, or particularly the acquisitions process, deciding what gets published. I will say that once a title has been acquired, publishers, our clients, will often come to us and ask for best advice on positioning, on cover design, on what marketplaces what sort of markets or channels make most sense for a book. Down to format, when to go out in second format, all kinds of like technical questions around making sure that a book is successful. But the initial decision to publish lies with the publisher.
Okay. And then are there times when conversations have turned to that you all say, you know what, I think we make a good team, like we would consider, acquiring you? Has that happened? What's that process like?
Sure. Well, we like to think of ourselves as being a good team with all of our publishers. But acquisitions are always something that we're interested in and thinking about. And I would definitely say that it's something that SNS is open to. If that answers your question.
Sure. And then in terms of a distribution deal, how does it work? Is it 1 year, 2 year? Like, do you all at some point renegotiate at some time? Like, what's that process like of people when you all are talking about now you're distributing them?
Yeah, what I would say is, and this is kind of our philosophy across the board, is that one size does not fit all. So we don't have a standard length for contracts or agreements. They can be arranged. It really depends on what the publisher needs, what the client is most, what their interests are, whether they want that long-term security or short-term flexibility. It's really not a one-size-fits-all. Our agreements have a range of terms.
Okay. And then in terms of, so somebody's right now, let's say they're on Ingram Spark, and their books are just wholesale and all that. How does it work with once they get and this doesn't have to specifically be with Simon Schuster, just in general, like how does it work with like the profits or like what are the terms that generally happen where the distributor now is taking a cut, like that whole process of, like, I don't know how detailed you can get, but I think people are probably interested in like, they make this much now, and then if they sign with a distributor, this is what they'll end up making.
Yeah. So I can't get into the details of how we structure our contracts, but what I would say is anyone who's interested in distribution shouldn't necessarily be thinking about what a distributor might be taking off the top, or what a distributor would be taking in terms of profits. What the focus really is, and the reason for working with a distributor, is to grow profits, to expand distribution, to sell to more consumers, to sell more books. So what I would say is anyone who comes to SNS as a client is going to see a significant expansion in distribution from, especially from something like an Ingram Spark. You will all of a sudden have thousands of units going out the door to different retailers all around the world, and that to some extent trumps any potential fee that you might be paying to your distributor, because the upside is just so significant. It really supersedes the fee, I think.
Okay, great. And then in terms of, I want to make sure that publishers who are lucky enough to get signed set up the relationship successfully. So is there any advice you can give to them? Let's say they're hopefully getting signed. What can they do to then set themselves up so that they are the best partner to you all as a distributor?
Sure. So if you are looking to partner with the distributor, I think the most important thing you can do is be open to new ideas, to open to leveraging all of the advantages that your distributor may present to you. And to some extent, that means kind of being ready for that expansion. In reach that I just mentioned previously. Having a healthy company in general, having a company with a healthy cash flow is incredibly important. Being prepared to take on greater risk than you may have previously, because as you know, Chris, and I'm sure many of your members know, you ship more units, there's greater potential for returns. There's just a lot more on the line when you're shipping to hundreds and hundreds of different accounts, and working with some really big retail partners like a Barnes and Noble or an Amazon or a Target. There's a huge amount of upside, but you kind of need to be ready for that adventure that will ensue when you enter into a partnership with a distributor.
Yeah, I know you mentioned book returns. I know that is something that people can be blindsided by. Luckily, when they work with someone like you all, you prepare them for that. But I know there are like some publishers who've like gone out of business, where suddenly they get like they didn't prepare to get that many returns, and they didn't have money sitting to be able to afford that. So I guess when you're working with them, do you all talk to them about like the business side of like, for every like let's say you sell 1,000 books or something to a bookstore, you should have a certain amount of money saved up that if we get whatever 20% return, you'll be fine. Like how are they safeguarding themselves? Or is that something that, because the thing about indie publishing especially is like, no matter how many resources that like IBPA has that there are out there, there are some things it's hard to teach every aspect of. And it's like you like have to know there might be 20%. You need to keep 20% of, it's like, so how do you all prepare them for that type of like surprise?
Yeah. So our goal is for it not to be a surprise.
All right.
My team at SNS actually manages day-to-day relationships with all of our distributed publishers. And part of our mandate is to make sure that a publisher is prepared and ready for any risk that they may be taking, and to help them minimize risk. So we'll often use historical sales data, looking at a specific type of book, and we know how that type of book historically has performed at a Barnes and Noble or at a Walmart or a Sam's Club. So we will advise, if the opportunity presents itself for a significant buy from one of these types of retailers, we'll explain to the publisher what the average return rate is for these types of books or this type of promotion, or what the sort of options might be to minimize return exposure. So it's a conversation that happens. We always make sure our publishers are comfortable and understand the deal they're about to make with a retail partner. And it's really just all about communication and making sure everyone's comfortable. again, because our motto is really our sort of way of doing business is centered around flexibility. We don't force a publisher to do anything, right? We wouldn't force them to ship to a specific retailer if they're not comfortable with that. Or we wouldn't force them into a co-op opportunity if they didn't think that there was enough upside to that. So it's ongoing conversation, and we make sure everyone's comfortable before we move into any kind of big risk-taking opportunity.
Sure, yeah. And in terms of that relationship, you all have ideas for places where the books should be distributed. So I'm assuming then the publisher comes to you all sometimes and says, I think it would sell really well in coffee shops or something. Do you all talk about stuff like that? They have like a list of places and you have a list of places?
Oh yeah, all the time. And this is where a publisher's expertise and our expertise as both a publisher and distributor come into play, and I think really create something great. We are constantly talking about distribution goals, which channels and accounts are mission critical for a book, where an author may hope to see their book. We talk a lot about regionality of titles, seasonality of titles, and where it makes most sense for them to work. And we're often given sort of distribution goals, and we hand that over to my colleagues in sales, and kind of do regular check-ins to make sure that we're meeting objectives, meeting expectations.
Great. And then I know when you and I spoke before, we talked about there being a publishing program is better if it's evenly distributed throughout the year. So you mentioned let's say they specialize in holiday books or something, like for, Christmas or Hanukkah or something. Do you work with them in terms of okay, well, what can we do then the rest of the year to keep you all, publishing books that are also popular at other times of year, so that you're not just, this one time a year doing super well and then maybe struggling a little bit?
For sure. Many publishers, not all, have sort of a frontlist and a backlist revenue stream. And so backlist can, of course, be seasonal, and you can see a bump in your backlist. Let's say if you have a backlist title that is directly tied to Valentine's Day that does really, really well, you're going to see that bump there, or Easter, things like that. Some backlist titles generate revenue consistently every month throughout the year. So that's super helpful as well. But on frontlist is probably where we are most collaborative, because that's what we're sort of actively selling in on the national account level on that sell-in schedule. So we will often bring requirements from retailers when retailers are setting for certain holidays, and we'll advise a publisher to make sure that they're aligned with retailer expectations. And then more broadly, in terms of cadence of frontlist revenue, we will often advise a publisher, particularly if you have titles that are very closely aligned content-wise, to try to avoid sort of competing with yourself in a specific moment in time, on release. And it's just general good practice to spread your front list out to ensure that front list revenue is kind of evenly distributed, sort of in parallel with backlist revenue.
So we've talked about retail stores and bookstores and such. What about direct to consumer? Is that something that you all handle too? Like something like Amazon? Do you take over the Amazon account? How does that work?
We absolutely can support direct-to-consumer sales. It's something we do for many of our publishers, and it's again one of those really fun added benefits that, on top of retail and wholesale partnerships, we can also facilitate fulfillment of direct-to-consumer orders. When you join forces with Simon & Schuster, we become your vendor of record with all of the major national accounts, and it just streamlines the process for accounts to know who to go to place their order. So yes, you would be Simon & Schuster's distributed client with an account like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, ReaderLink.
Okay, great. And then sometimes flipping the script, sometimes it may not be a good fit for a publisher to get traditional distribution. Can you explain like what are the times when it might, like a publisher just might not be good for that, and to try to have them keep that in mind? Because I know sometimes they're hitting their head against the wall. They're like, I can't succeed unless I get traditional distribution, but might not even be a good fit for them.
Right. So, I'm, as someone who, my career is in distribution, I think it's a fantastic component of the publishing landscape here. I definitely think all publishers should be thinking about distribution as part of their business plan, exploring what options are out there, and throughout their sort of evolution as a publisher. And as you say, Chris, not everyone is in this moment ready for distribution, but the ways you can get yourself ready is by making sure that you have a healthy, stable business, that your customers, that your market segment, that you understand how to market and reach those consumers, and that you're open to growth. That you're open and flexible and willing to grow potentially pretty rapidly with a distributor. If you're nervous about, well, not if you're nervous, but if you can't imagine your business taking on new risk, if you don't see your books as books that should be living in a wide range of retail environments, then maybe you're not ready. But I would certainly encourage all publishers to kind of always revisit the topic, reevaluate if it's the right time, and to be talking to distribution partners to understand what they're looking for, so that hopefully one day we can strike a deal.
Yeah, great. I want to ask, we're talking about bookstores. I think that's kind of in people's head as publishers. I want to get my books in bookstores, but are there other interesting sales channels that you see where you're like, people should be thinking about this? It's actually a really great, area that a lot of our publishers sell books, and they're just not thinking about that.
Oh, sure, absolutely. We have at Simon Schuster, I think, a world-class specialty retail special markets sales force. So they are selling books into specialty retail accounts like, TJ Maxx and Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, but they're also working with partners in the corporate space. So we have a premium sales, people who specialize in premium sales. We have an educational wholesale group that focuses on the education channel and making sure that educators have access to books for their classrooms. I could continue on. I came from actually the international sales group at Simon & Schuster. That's where I started my career. And the international channel is an incredible growth opportunity, especially for small publishers that have never really given their books exposure outside of the US market. There's a huge potential for growth if you can just get access to it, and that's what Simon & Schuster offers.
And then how does something like translations work with the books? Do you all kind of work with the publisher about getting, a Spanish language, other languages, versions of the books?
So some of our publishers do bring Spanish language editions to Simon & Schuster. So often publishers will sort of maintain those subrights internally and slowly sell them, license them out. As they do, it's actually really helpful for us. So to know that you have licensed out Mandarin is really, really helpful for our team that's selling the English language edition in that marketplace. So it's helpful to have that information. And honestly, if you're selling subrights in foreign languages, it indicates a pretty strong potential for your title in whatever language we're selling. But SNS, it's definitely Spanish language is a really important channel for us to be growing, and we encourage publishers to do that, to sell rights for foreign language, but to also maintain some of them and see how they work in the U.S. market.
Yeah, and right now when we're recording this, the Frankfurt Book Fair is going on. So do you all represent your publisher's books at something like the Frankfurt Book Fair, or do they do that separately from their distributor?
A little bit of both. So our distributed clients have representation and at the SNS stand at Frankfurt. Actually, there are several clients who have titles featured on big screens on our stand this year. We have lots of samples, and we're selling client titles to international accounts from the Simon Schuster booth. But we also have clients that want to, represent their brand, that maybe they have the money to do it, and have their own booths at Frankfurt, and are, meeting with rights agents and meeting with the media and representing themselves there as well. But it's kind of they've kind of got it doubled up because we're also working on their behalf at the fair.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so before we finish, I know there are a lot of indie publishers out there, because I've talked to them, who are frustrated because they want traditional distribution. Something like having it through Simon & Schuster would be so incredible for them, like you said, to get into these channels. So I just want to see, do you have any words of encouragement for them, or maybe advice, just kind of like the last, thing to talk about in terms of how can they make this dream come true to be able to work with someone like Simon & Schuster?
Sure. So in terms of advice, I would kind of reiterate what I've mentioned earlier in our conversation, to be constantly revisiting. It's not something that you necessarily need to be focused on every single day as you grow your business. But, as you reach new benchmarks for yourself, maybe that's getting books into Barnes & Noble, or reaching Amazon Top 100, or, whatever your goals are, as you are reaching those goals, to reevaluate whether it's time to revisit that conversation with SNS, or to start doing research on which distributors seem to make most sense given your profile as a publisher, your size, and what you're looking to accomplish. I would also encourage publishers who are looking for distribution to make sure that you know who your market is, know who your consumers are, your readers, know how to reach those readers. And then when you do reach out to a distributor to explore partnership, that you make it clear that you have a platform or a strong understanding of who your consumer is. You have maybe data to back up that strength and that connection with the consumer, and that you're open to growth, and you're ready for it. In terms of words of encouragement, I would just reiterate that Simon & Schuster is a really flexible partner in publishing and in distribution. We are about embracing diversity of perspective, your diversity of the type, in terms of the type of company that you are, the way that you structure your business, the way you work with authors, expectations you may have. We're really kind of a fun, dynamic partner to be working with. And I would encourage you to keep Simon & Schuster in mind as you explore opportunity for partners to help you grow and get to the next level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know IBPA, one of our big things is just access, helping our indie publishers succeed. And this is such an exciting opportunity for them. So I'm just grateful that you all have something like this, and that, you're embracing indie publishers. So I just want everyone out there to know, again, the website you should check out is simonschusterpublishing.com/SNS-distribution. And definitely check it out, give it a go. And hopefully they'll get a chance to talk directly to you. They'll have a path to traditional distribution. So thank you. Thanks for explaining how the process works to all the publishers out there.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And I also want to thank the IBPA for inviting me here. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I look forward to learning more about your members as they reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, I will expect a flood of people after this. But yes, I know. If anybody wants to learn more about the benefits of IBPA membership, you can visit ibpa-online.org. And also make sure to subscribe to this podcast. We drop a new episode on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast the last Thursday of every month. Keith, thank you again. You seemed like you really genuinely love books and like working with publishers. So thanks for providing this opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.